My friends, tonight we celebrate. Drink and be merry.
For glory, for Persia, advance!
What if I told you there was once a city so powerful, so rich, and so heavily fortified that the world believed it could never fall? That city was Babylon. By the 6th century BC, Babylon wasn't just another city. It was the jewel of Mesopotamia, the crown of kings, and the beating heart of an empire. Its walls stretched so high and thick that ancient writers claimed 4 horse-drawn chariots could race on top of them side by side. The Euphrates River ran right through the middle of the city, providing endless water and making a siege seem impossible. Merchants from across the world came to Babylon to trade. Gold, silver, spices, silks. Everything flowed into its markets. Its hanging gardens, if they truly existed, were counted among the wonders of the ancient world. To the people of the Near East, Babylon was not just a city, it was a symbol of wealth, pride, and invincibility. And yet, it was rotting from the inside. The king at the time, Nabonidus, was unlike any ruler Babylon had seen before. Instead of focusing on leading his people or strengthening the military, Nabonidus was obsessed with religion and archaeology. He spent years away from Babylon, living in the distant oasis of Timur in Arabia, while his son Belshazzar ruled in his place. To the Babylonians, this was strange, even insulting. Their king had abandoned them. Even worse, Nabonidus neglected the worship of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. To the Babylonians, this was not just bad politics, it was sacrilege. The priests of Marduk, who held enormous influence, were furious. The people grumbled. To them, the great city still looked mighty on the outside, but inside it was crumbling with discontent. This was the Babylon that Cyrus the Great looked upon. But before we get to him, let's step into the city itself on the night that would change history.
My friends, tonight we celebrate. Drink and be merry.
Picture it. Torches blazing in the streets, music echoing through the palace halls, and wine flowing like water. Belshazzar, the co-ruler of Babylon, was throwing one of the most extravagant feasts the city had ever seen. Thousands of nobles, officials, and soldiers crowded the banquet hall. The mood was arrogant, defiant. Yes, the Persian army was somewhere outside the city walls, but so what? Babylon's walls had never been breached. They were safe, or so they thought. It was during this very feast, according to the biblical book of Daniel, that a terrifying omen appeared. As the music thundered and goblets of gold were lifted high, a mysterious hand began to write glowing words on the palace wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The laughter died. The music stopped. No one understood the words. But the prophet Daniel was summoned, and he gave the chilling interpretation. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Belshazzar laughed it off, or at least pretended to. After all, the walls of Babylon still stood tall. The gates were locked. The river flowed strong. No army in the world could touch them. But outside those walls, in the darkness, Cyrus the Great was already setting his plan in motion. Because Babylon, for all its glory, had one fatal weakness. And Cyrus was the kind of man who knew exactly how to exploit it. Cyrus the Great was not just a conqueror, he was a strategist, a master of minds as much as of armies. While other kings relied on brute force, Cyrus preferred something far more effective, turning enemies into allies before the battle even began. And Babylon was ripe for the taking. Let's start with the people inside the city. Many of them were not Babylonians at all. They were captives, deported from their homelands by previous Babylonian kings. Among them were the Jews, carried away after the destruction of Jerusalem decades earlier. They hated Babylon, they longed for freedom, and Cyrus promised them exactly that. Then came the priests, the guardians of Marduk's temple, the beating spiritual heart of the city. They were furious with Nabonidus for abandoning Marduk's worship. Cyrus played this to perfection. He sent messages into Babylon declaring that Marduk himself had chosen Cyrus to be Babylon's new protector. The propaganda spread like fire in dry grass. Suddenly, Cyrus was not an enemy. He was a liberator, chosen by the gods. This was the first half of his plan. Conquer Babylon before his army even entered the gates. But the second half, that was pure genius. Babylon's greatest strength was the Euphrates River. It flowed directly through the city, under its massive walls, keeping its people supplied with water and food. A normal siege would starve most cities in weeks or months, but Babylon could last years, maybe decades. No army could wait that long. Cyrus didn't try. Instead, he thought differently. What if he didn't have to scale the walls at all? What if he could simply walk under them? So he devised a daring plan. His men began digging canals upstream, miles away from the city. Slowly, carefully, they diverted the waters of the Euphrates. Day by day, the river level dropped. What had once been a rushing force became a trickle. Eventually, the mighty Euphrates became shallow enough for soldiers to wade through. Now picture it, deep inside the city, the Babylonians feasted, laughed, and drank, utterly unaware of what was happening outside. The walls stood strong, the gates locked tight. But beneath their feet, the river, their lifeline, their shield, was vanishing. Cyrus timed the assault for the perfect moment. Ancient sources tell us it was during a festival night when the Babylonians were drunk with celebration. While music thundered through the palace, while torches blazed in the streets, the Persian army crept down into the muddy riverbed. Step by step, shield by shield, they approached the hidden gates where the river flowed under the walls. The Babylonians had guards posted there, of course, but the guards too were distracted by the festival. Some were drunk, others were careless. The gates that should have been barred were left wide open. And so the Persians entered, not with ladders, not with battering rams, not with endless bloodshed. They simply walked into the city through its veins, silent as shadows, moving through the darkness while the people above danced and sang. By the time the alarm was raised, it was already too late.
Cyrus had pulled off one of the most brilliant military maneuvers in history. He didn't storm Babylon, he slipped inside without breaking a sweat. And here's the beauty of it. The city didn't burn. There was no mass slaughter. There wasn't even a long, desperate battle. Instead, the gates of Babylon, the same gates that had stood against countless enemies, were thrown open from the inside. Priests, nobles, and citizens, tired of their absent king, welcomed Cyrus as a savior. That night, Babylon, the city the world thought could never fall, collapsed not with a roar of defiance, but with a whisper of surrender. And when Cyrus entered, he didn't come as a conqueror drenched in blood. He came as a king chosen by the gods, a restorer of order, a liberator of peoples. But make no mistake, this was not luck. This was the brilliance of Cyrus the Great. Win the people, weaken the walls, strike when no one is looking. The Babylonians thought their city was unbreakable. Cyrus showed them it was already broken. The night Babylon fell should have been a night of music, wine, and celebration. The great city, wrapped in its colossal walls and lit with festival torches, was alive with laughter. Inside the royal palace, Prince Belshazzar, the son of King Nabonidus, was hosting a feast so extravagant that even the Bible remembered it centuries later. But while the Babylonians drank to their gods, an invisible enemy crept under their feet. Through the shallow waters of the Euphrates, Persian soldiers waded in silence. Their armor glistened under the moonlight. Their footsteps splashed quietly in the mud. Every man knew the plan: move quickly, move quietly, and once inside, secure the gates. Imagine the shock of a guard stumbling out to relieve himself, only to see shadows rising from the riverbed, men armed with spears and shields, climbing up into the very heart of the city. By the time he raised the alarm, the Persians were already inside. The outer defenses of Babylon, its walls, moats, and watchtowers, were useless now. The danger was not outside, but already within. And here is where Cyrus's genius truly shines. You'd expect chaos, screaming, fire in the streets, soldiers clashing in alleys. But Babylon didn't fall like other cities. There was almost no resistance. Why? Because Cyrus had already won the city's heart before he ever entered its walls. The priests of Marduk, long alienated by Nabonidus's neglect, had thrown their loyalty behind Cyrus. To them, this invasion was not a conquest, but a rescue. When Persian soldiers reached the inner gates, they were not always met with swords. Sometimes they were met with open doors. The people, too, were weary. Babylon's population was a mosaic of nations: Jews, Syrians, Phoenicians, and countless others dragged there by Babylon's cruel deportations. To them, Cyrus's promises of freedom and return were like water in the desert. Why die defending the throne of a king who didn't even care enough to live in his own capital? And so, the greatest city of its age, famed for its hanging gardens, for walls so wide a chariot could ride on top of, was taken almost without a fight. Some ancient accounts say the Persians simply marched through the streets as if in a parade. People lined the roads, not to resist, but to watch in awe. For the citizens of Babylon, life went on. Markets opened, farmers brought their goods, shops stayed alive. The conquest barely disturbed the rhythm of the city.
Even the king himself could not rally his people. Belshazzar, the prince regent, was caught in the middle of his drunken feast. The book of Daniel tells us of a mysterious hand that appeared during the banquet, writing strange words on the wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The prophet Daniel interpreted them as doom. Babylon's kingdom was numbered, weighed, and divided. That very night, Belshazzar was slain, and the Persians controlled the city. As for Nabonidus, the absent king, he tried to flee but was soon captured. No last stand, no hero's defense, just capture and silence. The next morning, Babylon awoke not to fire and smoke, but to something extraordinary: order. Cyrus had forbidden looting. His soldiers did not sack the temples, burn homes, or slaughter citizens. Instead, they patrolled the streets to keep peace. For many Babylonians, it must have felt less like an invasion and more like a regime change. It was a conquest like no other, bloodless, calculated, and strangely calm.
The Babylonians expected war, but instead got a new ruler who walked in as if the city had always been his. And that was the brilliance of Cyrus's conquest. He didn't need to fight the people of Babylon because he made them believe he was already their king. He didn't have to tear down the walls because he slipped under them. He didn't burn the city because he needed it whole. Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, almost as easily as one man handing another a crown. That night, the legend of Cyrus the Great reached its peak. He was not just a conqueror, he was a liberator, a strategist, and above all, a ruler who understood that the greatest victories are the ones won without unsheathing the sword.